So welcome everyone. I'm really thrilled that we're able to gather again today. We're starting into winter. We had our first big snowfall in Maine, and the power went off here, but not for very long, so that's wonderful. I'm finding my place. I'm just finding my place in the document. Okay, so I wanted to start out this morning with a quote from Dogen. Dogen was the Japanese Zen master, the extraordinary visionary master who revitalized and established the foundation for Zen practice in Japan. To study the self is to forget the self. And then the longer quote, to study this Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind as well as the bodies and minds of others drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. So in working with anger, we're studying the self. The prajna that arises through studying the self allows us to forget the self. And we could say anger is one of the myriad things that allows the actualization. I want to contrast that quote with a quote from Pema Chodron. The wonderful irony of the spiritual journey is that we find it only leads us to become just as we are. The exalted state of enlightenment is nothing more than fully knowing ourselves and our world just as we are. The exalted state of enlightenment is nothing more than fully knowing ourselves and our world just as we are. So, as we enter this afternoon, we're starting with that quality of knowing ourselves just as we are, accepting ourselves just as we are, and allowing the process of knowing ourselves to actualize that state of realization that the Buddha had. So meditation really is not about finding comfort. It is about knowing ourselves, becoming familiar with ourselves, finding the source of suffering and uprooting it. And the uprooting it being such a clear prajna arising that it is strengthened and becomes that realization. I was going over a lot of the teachings that I received from His Holiness Chetseng Rinpoche in the Sherivasti teacher training. And I kept seeing one quote over and over. I just kept repeating that quote. It was, you can't skip any of the steps. So sometimes we think of, oh, we encountered the Four Noble Truths in the first teaching we ever had, but it remains extraordinarily powerful and the ground. Seeing suffering for what it is, seeing the causes of suffering, seeing the path, and cessation. So that process of being on the spiritual journey leads to the lasting peace of the Buddha's realization, the fearless wisdom and bodhicitta. But we can't skip any of the steps. And learning about our poisonous emotions is one of the most important steps. So it's not about repressing or stuffing or skipping over them, pretending they're not there, not by wanting to cut them away, to be rid of them, not by wanting to be a different, perfect person, but by really looking at the suffering and the causes of suffering and uprooting it. And I love the word uprooting. And when I hear that word, I visualize a giant carrot or a dandelion. So, you know, when you pull a giant carrot out of the ground, you have to struggle with it, and then it has those little tendrils. And if you're trying to pull a dandelion out of your garden, you have to go down deeper and deeper and deeper till you get to the tip of the root, because if you don't get to the tip of the root, it can just grow again, and it grows stronger and it multiplies. So that's what we're doing with anger. We're really examining it. And when it's seen and understood for what it is, the mirage that Shantideva talked about yesterday, then our prajna is what sees that clearly. And that is the wisdom arising. And that's why we can say it's a dance. So it's not that we're rid of it, it's in the uprooting, our prajna is strengthened, can see clearly. And as it grows stronger, the ignorance simply dissolves into the prajna eventually. So that's a really important thing to remember, because we want to know ourselves, not to hide from ourselves. And we want to be unafraid of knowing ourselves. I once taught a retreat, it was for young people, and everybody was between the ages of 18 and 25. And when I had interviews with all of the students, almost all of them, I mean, they were so young. They almost all broke into tears, saying they felt that they had something inside them that was such a scary place that they were afraid of meditation. They just didn't want to touch it because they thought that it would be uncontrollable to some degree. So in many ways, we still have parts of ourselves that are like that. And even the youngest person with very little experience of life might still have a part of that. So we want to keep reassuring ourselves that the truth of our nature is our Buddha nature. And with gentleness and with tenderness, we can look at even the most scary places and work with them. Because what only can be revealed at the end is our Buddha nature. So I want to give you another quote from Pema Chodron, and I guess I've been thinking a lot of Pema Chodron with great gratitude, because when Pema Chodron taught meditation, she taught that you had to, at the same time, teach about what you would encounter in meditation, that you can't separate something as simple as shamatha from, you will then encounter your shadow side, you will encounter anger and desire, you will encounter your wounds. And it's actually, I didn't know it at the time, but it's not a traditional way of teaching meditation, although the foundational Buddhism or Theravadan Buddhism puts a great emphasis on understanding the hindrances. But this quote is very important. Only by learning to fully embrace all aspects of ourselves, even the most seemingly negative elements of our minds and hearts, will we be able to fully embrace others. Only by discovering the basic goodness in both our lotus and our mud will we come to see the basic goodness of all living beings. So this quote has several important points in it. And first I want to point out the word embrace. So that is such a loving word. And the idea of fully embracing all aspects of ourselves is something that actually I think takes a long time for us to learn. She once gave the example of working with our habits of anger and our inner wounds, but I think this would apply to anger or desire. She said, it's like a child who has scabies. So you can take the child to the doctor, and the doctor would say, this really itches, but if you scratch it, it makes it worse, and you're going to destroy your skin, and the wounds can become infected, and they can spread. And then she said, you take the child home, and you can tell them that over and over. So we can hear the Dharma over and over, that these habits are only causing our own suffering, that anger or desire, every time we give into it, makes the habit deeper and stronger. But the point of fully embracing that, I didn't get it until she said it so bluntly, is eventually the child has to love themselves enough not to scratch. So part of this investigation is to learn how to love ourselves not enough to scratch the habit of anger, the habit of desire. And that to me is just beautiful. So then she says the relationship between loving ourselves and our bodhisattva aspiration is that only by doing that will we be able to love others. Only by seeing how difficult it is to change a habit, how painful it is to inhabit that habit, do we begin to touch and understand someone else's pain when they're angry, someone else's pain when they're caught up in their own destructive behaviors. So to help others, we have to really see how painful it is for us when we are in these mental states. And then when we start to see that by really looking at this, that our prajna starts to arise and there's more clarity in our understanding, that begins to open the idea that there is a basic goodness in the lotus and the mud. And this is what Shantideva's whole chapter on patience is, that the investigation of the mud becomes the teacher. The mud itself becomes the teacher. The anger itself becomes the teacher. And at first we mistake that for, we think someone is provoking the anger or causing us harm. But it's our very investigation that gives rise to the prajna. So it is these very circumstances that we have in our own frail human mind that open the prajna. So eventually, what begins to arise actually is the wisdom of equality, that the wisdom of the lotus part is perfect wisdom, and the wisdom of the mud part is also perfect wisdom. So that is a great way to begin. It gives us confidence. So we started out yesterday with the dance metaphor. And when you think of some of these difficult people in your life in difficult situations and how we carry them to our cushion, why some are so hard to get an understanding, we see that when we have a big wound, it becomes a very firm story, and that every time we touch that wound, it seems like the story carries us away. So you can see the strength of things that are very, very sticky, that our mind only needs to just say the first word and we go right into that movie. Then we see, all right, so that disturbs meditation, definitely. We're carried away, an hour is gone. Then we see, okay, then there is irritation and lesser kinds of aversions, and it manifests as an agitation or a restless mind. So we know when we're on our cushion that sometimes it's like we feel like we can't sit still. There's just a pervasive kind of agitation. So that's not a big drama, but it's still a quality of aversion that's still interrupting our samadhi. The most subtle aspect of aversion is a quality of not only not wanting to be here in the sense of get me out of here, get me out of this restless body, get me out of this movie that I don't want to be present for, but essentially it's the habit of being in the present moment, sitting, staying with your mind, the habit of moving away from the present moment. So that habit is so very strong and it's so very subtle, we don't even recognize it, that we start to meditate and then we're away. We start to meditate and then we're away. It doesn't matter what thought we are away in, we have a subtle habit of wanting to be away. And this is why it's important to investigate all the levels of anger and aversion, because at its most subtle level, even if we think, oh, I'm such a peaceful person, I don't have any drama, I've been in therapy 30 years, I've done all my wounds, we still have that habit of wanting to be away. Then what I like about Vajrayana, Vajrayana starts to be really fun because it's saying that the hindrances and poisons not only are not something to get away from, but they're our crown. They become the crown that we wear as an enlightened being. And I'm just going to see if I can pull this up again. Oh, I put a picture in it will take a second for me to find again. I get several documents opened on my desk. Okay, there it is. I want to show you a picture of Vajrayogini to really look at that. The tankas are visual philosophy. And so when we start to see some of these images in Vajrayana, they're both compelling and a little frightening. And Vajrayogini is considered somebody who's semi-wrathful. But I want you to look at her crown and her necklace. So she's wearing a crown of skull and a necklace of skulls. And when we really think about how significant it is to investigate the poisons or the hindrances as a path to enlightenment, here's a close-up of the crown of skulls. These are the 5 poisons that now become her crown as an enlightened being. And each of the skulls on the necklace is a kind of mental factor that she has seen the emptiness of, that she has seen with prajna. So it's a display of the growth along the path and the work along the path in a very graphic but beautiful way, in the sense that it's an invitation not to be repulsed or frightened of the very human poisonous emotions that are present in all human minds, but to have confidence that in this investigation, the prajna arises that brings the great realization eventually. So I really have always loved that image. So I feel like yesterday we actually only just got to the chapter on anger, but what we did accomplish was establishing that it is a worthy goal to be free from anger, to have an open heart of bodhicitta. It is a worthy goal for our life, and that there are beings who accomplished it, so we can have confidence that it is possible and that there is a path. And we had, I hope, a felt sense to some degree of it actually hurts us mentally and physically to harbor anger. So in some ways, that's the child recognizing that the scabies hurts them. And now we have to get to the point of convincing ourselves to love ourselves enough to not scratch. And I want to start with another quote from His Holiness, Chetseng Rinpoche. When thoughts lead the mind, you are in samsara. When mind leads the thoughts, you are free. As you more deeply tranquilize the thoughts, you are leaving samsara. So if our mind is taken over by anger, the thoughts are leading the mind. If we're investigating anger, mind is leading the thoughts. And as they become less scary and more workable, we're leaving samsara. So we resolve to uproot the anger, to see our very humanness, the frailty of our own mind, and in our humanness, see the nature of all minds, developing the skills to benefit beings. And again, just a reminder, as we're working today, not to create what-if situations, rather to work on your own direct experience, and that when we're investigating this, it's about uprooting the cause that hurts us. It's not about resolution, justice, right or wrong. It's seeing that anger is one of the kleshas, and the word klesha, one of the recent translation is torture. So we torture ourselves. So we're looking at dissolving that aspect of our mind that maintains the pain in just that way. So at the beginning of the chapter of anger, he reminds us again, good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity or offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. Reminds us again, how it hurts us and how it hurts all our relationships. So I'm sure if you have loved ones, your families, your children, your sangha, you remember how your loved one face just sort of crumpled and collapsed when you said something really mean or really angry. And we've built this loving relationship for all these years, and in this moment, I have harmed it. So we can really take that in, how painful it is, what we lose, and how hurtful it is for others. And he actually goes on for quite a while, convincing us why anger is harmful. Those tormented by the pain of anger will never know tranquility of mind. Strangers they will be to every pleasure. Sleep departs them. They can never rest. So I know that when the election was at its height, I have my walking bubble. We would go out and walk by the ocean. Someone would bring up politics. Everybody's anger would be triggered. And here we were at the gorgeous Maine ocean thinking about junk. So to reinforce this, I mentioned Nelson Mandela yesterday, and this is what he said as he was leaving prison. The reporter asked him, "Tell me the truth. When you were leaving prison after the 27 years and walking down that road to freedom, didn't you hate them all over again?" He said, absolutely I did, because they'd imprisoned me for so long. I was abused. I didn't get to see my children grow up. I lost my marriage and the best years of my life. I was angry and I was afraid because I had not been free in so long. But as I got closer to the car that would take me away, I realized that when I went through that gate, if I still hated them, they would still have me. And I wanted to be free. So I let go. So just like Nelson Mandela, we want to learn how to let go. So Shantideva is really quite practical in terms of how to begin the process of letting go. And he's very clear, start with little things. There's nothing that does not grow light through habit and familiarity. Putting up with little cares, I train myself to bear great adversity. So he says, just start with the smallest things, red traffic lights. Start with, every single announcement about the virus causing a longer shutdown. Whatever it is for you that is just simple, everyday occurrence. Someone was saying at one of our last retreats, they had a loud clock. So a loud clock when you're trying to meditate, the simplest of things, watching the irritation arise, seeing how it interrupts you, how it starts to create a frisson of energy in your continuum, your heart, mind, and body, and relax into that and use that simple thing over and over and over. So that is a very wonderful piece of advice and a way to be totally non-judgmental with a sense of humor. For me, I hear the refrigerator, I have a very old and loud refrigerator. So I can listen to that and say, oh, what an interruption, or I can laugh and say, oh, there it goes again. So the wisdom of this is quite evident. And he draws us in further, and I'm going right to the pivotal set of verses from this chapter. I think we're ready to look into them. And he starts by saying, all right, even the deepest wound, even the most difficult thing, now that we're prepared for it, whatever has happened, every injury whatsoever, the whole variety of evil deeds is brought about by circumstances. None is independent, none autonomous. So he's setting up a situation that will help us reframe any event, anything that we've been holding on to, anything that's been quite difficult. Conditions, once assembled, have no thought that they will engender some result, and that which is engendered does not think that it is produced by such conditions. So the conditions don't think they're going to injure me, Khenmo, and once assembled, they don't think, I don't think, wow, this has been assembled by all of these conditions. This is happening throughout our experiences, and for the most part is true but invisible. So that's the setup. And I'm going to go right to how we work with a difficult event. So you're walking down the street and someone out of the blue punches you, or someone out of the blue hits you with a club, or someone out of the blue pulls a gun and shoots you. This would be difficult for anyone. So this is the scenario we're working with that he's going to deconstruct to help us understand that. So first he says, all right, these were karmic conditions on your side and on their side. The karmic conditions put you on that street. Their karmic conditions put you on that street. And he sets us up with another verse as well. All right, let's just look at the basic facts of human nature. Those who are like wanton children are by their very nature prone to injure others. What point is there in being angry, like resenting fire for its heat? We know that all human minds have the potential of Buddha nature and all of the poisonous emotions. We know that there are many different kinds of people affected by lesser and grosser states of afflicted mind. And just by little kids who get in a fight at a playground, like wanton children, their nature is prone to injure others. What is the point of being angry? Like resenting fire for its heat. Fire by its very nature has heat. Human beings, sentient beings, by their very nature, have the poisonous emotions. So let's go back to the scenario. Although it is indeed the stick that hurts me, I'm angry at the one who wields it, striking me, but he is driven, impelled by anger. So it is his wrath I should resent. This is the pivotal verse in the whole chapter. We're convinced that anger is destructive, that it is hurtful for us, that it's a habit we don't want to keep developing. We, as Buddhists, know something about karma, but we're looking at everything has causes and conditions. So he's saying, take the worst moment in your life and look at causes and conditions. And just to be gentle, I'm not saying you should look at the worst incident of your life right this second. Please build up to it in your own way, in your own rate of speed. But when you're ready, this is an extraordinary tool. Although it is indeed the stick that hurts me, I'm angry at the one who wields it, striking me. He is driven, impelled by anger, so it is his wrath I should resent. We think we have been hurt by someone who's purposefully harming us. So the I in this gets very, very strong, and you did this to me gets very, very strong. And he's saying, okay, let's really look at it. Through all of the karmic conditions, I'm at a certain place at a certain time, and I have a body. And this body that I have, this body is precious. This body allows me to live, to learn, to go to Dharma teachings, to see my family, to love my family. Am I angry at my body? It's actually my body that's hurting, right? Something hit my body, and it's my body that's hurting. Am I angry at my body? And we would say, well, no, I'm not angry at my body. I'm grateful to have a body. We can start to dissolve part of the anger by saying, well, it's the body that's hurting. When I had cancer, was I angry at my body for having cancer? Momentarily, you might be, but you want to live. You want to have a future life. So it's hard to stay angry at your body because your body is hurting or because your body is sick, because you know your body is also the gift of life. Okay. What's the other part of the story? It's the stick that is actually hitting my body and caused the pain, caused the bruise, caused the wound. Am I angry at the stick? You go, well, the stick is inanimate. Why would I be angry at the stick? We may be angry that there's no gun control. We may be angry that people have guns. But if there's a gun in front of us, it's hard to be angry at the piece of metal itself. We know that it's by itself simply a piece of metal. You can, melt it down. So can you maintain the story if it's just about the stick? All right. Then what about the person who holds the stick and holds the gun and who actually hurts us? I'm not mad at my body. I'm not mad at the stick. It's very easy to be angry at the person. However, that person ultimately is their Buddha nature. That person has been taken over like a zombie by wrath, by a mental state that has made them so crazy that they're doing a horribly harmful act that will impact their karma forever. So when we look at it like that, we can start to say, well, it's not really the person that I'm angry at. It's the wrath that took over that person. It is the confusion that took over that person. And like that person, I too have wrath. Like that person, I know what it feels like to be taken over, maybe not to the extent they were taken over, but we can recall a situation where we acted out in anger and were momentarily taken over. So looking at the whole situation together, we can say to ourselves, it's really about the anger, isn't it? It's really about the wrath, the poison that is infecting that person's mind and the poison that's infecting my mind. And in deep contemplation, this can be tremendously helpful. And I want to share with you, I was in retreat in Almora and in the mountains of India, just in the middle of nowhere. And it was a silent retreat. I was fortunate to be there, but I was in a tiny room. No one spoke English. And we were all in silence. And my brother was killed while I was in retreat. And this verse is really what helped me keep my sanity. Like Nelson Mandela, it's like I could stay in this little room just with my mind responding to the news, or I can find a way to deconstruct it. And what I really thought about were these two things, the Buddha nature and this verse separating the person who held the gun from the anger that took over the person's mind when they acted. And what I found most profound was to really think about, I was moderately new Buddhist at the time. If holiness has Buddha nature, for instance, if Garchen Rinpoche has Buddha nature and it's so evident and we can see it so clearly, and he says, Khenmo, you have Buddha nature. I can take that in and, I can start to believe it as a new Buddhist. I can start to have the tiny bit of confidence that that gives. But then if holiness has Buddha nature and I have Buddha nature, then so does the person who wields the stick. So does the person who murdered my brother. And when I worked with this day after day, because it was not easy to work with, but when I worked with it day after day, I finally could come to an acceptance that there was an aspect of this being that was just pure Buddha nature. So I find that this one verse is a profound teaching to help understand how to not misplace anger and make an enemy, and set up a scenario of you caused this harm to me. Rather, we all have Buddha nature, and I can find a way in this difficult situation to let go of that anger by breaking apart and looking at the components, all the different components. So he very poetically breaks down that situation and concludes, their weapon and my body, both are the causes of my suffering. They their weapon drew while I held out my body. Who then is more worthy of my anger? And he really invites us to see all the assembled conditions, and eventually he will help us move towards an understanding of our shared Buddha nature. So now I want to read you another poem. This is again from the early nuns, the first free women, because I want to invite you to feel confident in the rawness of the intensity of emotions when you encounter them, that they're workable. This is Upalavana. I hated my father, and I hated my mother for making him my father. I left home to get away from him and then found him everywhere I went. But I trained hard. I learned how to make my hands glow red with fire, and I handled the darkness with a chain. I swore no one would ever hurt me again. Then one night, while meditating in the woods, I was grabbed from behind. This sal tree is in full bloom, the man said. And here lying beneath, I find a sal flower with a lovely shaved head. Tell me, little flower, aren't you afraid? I turned around. He looked just like my father. It would have taken so little, a flick of a finger, to make him burn. I looked into his eyes and I saw the billion lifetimes that he and I had been running around this same circle together. Then I walked all the way down to the darkest parts of my own mind and stood in front of the blazing roar as countless lifetimes of fear and revenge threw themselves into the furnace. Burn with me, my sisters, and when you're ready, come up from that dark place where you've gone to be alone forever. The path leads directly through these vast worlds of fear and hate. We have all wounded and been wounded. We have all been made to feel weak. Yes, there is great strength in the darkness. Yes, the mind can be used as a knife or a chain. Yes, your whole world is burning itself to the ground. Ask the lizard, how long has this been going on? Ask the sunflower and her million seeds. The mind is more powerful than you can imagine. Ask yourself, what are you really prepared to give up in order to be free? The mind is more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Ask yourself what you are really prepared to give up in order to be free. So this is why we're looking at all of this, because it's not only in our lives that we make ourselves a victim with an enemy. Our world of samsara is functioning that way. You did this to me, so I'm doing this to you, so I will do this to you. War after war after war begins with victim and enemy. Ask the lizard, how long has this been going on? Ask what you'll be willing to give up to be free. And um, as we're looking at this, if you think in terms of not only our lives, but in the lives of our communities and in our countries, how much we think we need some resolution, we need some kind of justice, we need there to be a right and a wrong. But when we're working with this, it comes down to what are you willing to give up in order to be free, in order to let go of this entirely. On your side, it's no longer about right or wrong or resolution. You're letting go of what is torturing you so you can be free. There may never be an agreed on resolution or an agreed on right and wrong. And so often, in the old days, we would go to lectures of the Dalai Lama and he would say, you know, if you work with loving kindness, if you work with patience, I can't promise you that things will be different, but I can tell you that they will be the same if we don't learn to start looking at things in a new way. And then he just starts crying, which is just so precious a teaching. So what are we willing to give up? Are we willing to give up the notion of you did that to me and I am right and you are my enemy? Are we willing to give up the I am right part that runs the story over and over and over again? This happened to me, so I'm right. I'm the witness. What are we willing to give up to be free? And so now Shantideva takes us on quite an extraordinary journey. But I think I want to stop here and let that settle in before we continue. And I'm going to invite you to sit with this verse. I'm going to read the verse again. And it could be someone yelling at you. It could be a memory, you know, of a parent yelling at you in the past, someone at your office yelling at you. It's not necessarily physical. Although it is indeed the stick that hurts me, I am angry at the one who wields it, striking me. But he is driven, impelled by anger. So it is his wrath I should resent. It was I in the past who did harms to beings such as these. And so when others do me mischief, it is only just that they should injure me. So the causes and conditions of our karma, the causes and conditions of the other person's karma, both are coming into fruition, but one person is setting into motion a very heavy karma. And we're making a choice. What are we going to do with this hurt feeling that we have, this wound that we have? Okay, so now I really want to encourage you to share with each other. So we've covered two really major points. One is when we're working with our poisons, what does it mean to really love ourselves enough to want to change? Knowing that that is the pathway through changing a habit. And then what is it like to take something that's difficult and break apart all of the pieces, looking at how you framed it into for and against, me versus them, and just question all of the pieces of that construction. So I'm going to make it small groups so that everybody has time to share. These teachings are really not simple in any way, and they open a door to a lot of introspection. And for some things, you may want to set them aside and say, well, I'm not ready to work on this issue just now, but I might use this tool with something that is more accessible to me and a little less painful. But when I'm ready to work on the very difficult issue, this tool will be there. So let's give 6 minutes to these breakout rooms so you have time to really talk. So you'll see a button, and you press the button to open yourself into a room. And like magic, you're in a conversation. Okay. All right, I see people are joining the rooms. So you don't have to join a room. I'm just going to make sure everybody has someone in their room. Okay. All right, so at least everybody has someone in the room with them so that there can be a discussion. And for those folks on Facebook, I can go into the verses a little more deeply. We've been going right to the point. And there are lots of verses that build up to these crucial verses. I'm just going to pull up. So he goes into great detail, working up to verse 41, and then examining all of those aspects of it. So starting with the causes and conditions, just pulling up this document. Well, I'll go back to the beginning of this chapter because he builds this chapter so carefully and so beautifully. So when we were looking at the verse, there is nothing that does not grow light through habit and familiarity, putting up with little cares. I'll train myself to bear great adversity. And then he goes into this with a very clear explanation, saying, okay, and do I not already bear with common irritation, bites and stings of snakes and flies, experiences of hunger and thirst and painful rashes on my skin, heat and cold, the wind and rain, sickness, prison beatings? I'll not fret about such things. To do so only aggravates my trouble. When sorrows fall upon the wise, their minds remain serene and undisturbed, for in their war against defiled emotions, many are the hardships as in any battle. So essentially he's saying, look at all the hardships we bear without thinking about it when we're going after something that we want. In the old days, if you wanted a ticket to a special concert, you had to stand in line for days. Some people would spend the night because you could only get the ticket at the ticket office. When it was something so important to you, well, I remember the iPhone, the first iPhone, people would line around the block to get into the store to get the first iPhone. Didn't care about waiting in line, didn't care about the cold, didn't care about the rain. So when it's something we really want, then already we put up with lots of pains and small irritations. So he's saying, okay, start in the same way with anger. Start in the same way developing patience. Suffering also has its worth. Through sorrow, pride is driven out, and pity felt for those who wander in samsara. Evil is avoided, goodness seems delightful. So we learn a lot from suffering. I'm not angry. He goes into, I'm not angry with my body, with my bile and other humors, fertile sources of pain and suffering. So why should I resent my fellow creatures, victims too of these conditions? For they are unlooked for, undesired. These ills afflict us all the same. And likewise, though unwanted and unsought, defilements nonetheless are quick to come. So in the same way that we all get sick, in the same way that we all get the flu, we are not seeking the flu. In the same way, defilements are quick to come. Our anger is quick to come. Our pride is quick to come. We're not seeking pride, but something happens and bang, it's in our face. Never thinking, now I will be angry. People are impulsively caught up in anger. Irritation likewise comes, though never plans to be experienced. We never say, I'm going to walk out my door so I can get angry today. I'm going to plan on making myself angry today, yet it is there. So he's inviting us to look at all the causes and conditions. I'll repeat that verse. Every injury whatsoever, the whole variety of evil deeds, is brought about by circumstances. None is independent, none autonomous. All things then depend on something else. On this depends the fact that none are independent. Knowing this, we will not be annoyed at objects that resemble magical appearances. So I think it's time to close the rooms and invite people back. So it takes a minute for everyone to come back in the room. Thus, when enemies or friends are seen to act improperly, be calm and call to mind that everything arises from conditions. Be calm and call to mind that everything arises from conditions. Okay, people are slowly coming back. There's another half a minute. So we're just Waiting for the last few folks to come back. And I have a question for everyone. Some people are still speaking. Okay. So I'm curious to know how it is helpful for you to hear how much you have to love yourself in order to change a habit, and in what way it's helpful to look at all the different pieces of the causes and conditions and not give all the weight to just one. Were there any insights from your discussion you'd like to share? Thoughts, insights?
I can share something, Khenmo. What has been very helpful to me doing this practice today is by trying to be more compassionate with myself and really analyze, like you're saying, all the causes and conditions that bring about things that I would rather not happen. And the way that it makes me feel anger is to see how a lot of times, at least with me, that anger is tied to feelings of inadequacy that I'm trying to avoid. So there's a situation that I feel like I should have the power to fix or the power to solve. And rather than accepting it or, accepting some limitations on my part or just some humility, I get angry at the situation and blame it on other people or material conditions or other people's ignorance. And it's so much easier to blame those things than to be humble and understand that just because I want to fix something doesn't mean I have that ability. And just being kind with myself and looking at that way and looking at my deeper emotions, some of the stuff that is underneath the anger, it really helps to diffuse some of the anger because I can see that it really is coming from me and things that I need to work on within myself.
Thank you for sharing that. I do agree. It makes you braver at looking within.
Yeah, that's a very short way to say everything I just said.
Yeah. Other thoughts or insights?
Yeah, I noticed in a time when I was angry fairly recently that the fact that the sort of self-love thing you talk about, I didn't get mad at myself for being angry. I just let it sit there and be. And then I was able to look at it a little bit and see what should I do if I act from anger versus what would happen if I acted from some other space in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And in a couple of hours, the anger muted to something like a plan. And a kindly plan, as it turned out.
That is wonderful. And when we feel flexibility with our minds, then we have the spaciousness to do that. And some people are carrying things inside from a time when they didn't feel that spaciousness. So yes, that is the goal, to see that there, in every situation, there are many choices. So I know this is this is really big work. I mean, I remember studying this in several different classes, this chapter. And, as students, we'd walk up the hill, we'd be talking. We sit, have coffee, talking. So it's counterintuitive to the way we, as human beings, have solved or responded to things without the Dharma and without the teachings. You did this to me, I'm right, this is the truth. You did something bad, you're bad, etc., etc. or poor me, I'm a victim. This was so horrible, I can't get over it. So there's a wealth of information in this chapter to explore and settle in with. And it's not always the right time. It may take, for something quite difficult. This poem that I read, it's the first overt teaching on rape that I've ever heard. So if it's a deep trauma, it may take years to be ready to work on it, but it's extraordinary to hear this teaching come from an early nun about how she worked with something that was so difficult, and how it became clearly her path to enlightenment. So we can have confidence hearing that our older sister took this into meditation and came out with wisdom. Any other thoughts you wish to express publicly?
Khenmo?
Yeah.
So, like there's a lot of things I resolved, and I was saying in our breakout room that, and then they come back. And then I really get angry because they came back. I already had this resolved. Why am I thinking about it again? That seems to be my wildest anger. But one thing I can say, and looking back on my life and things happened, that I'm glad I didn't retaliate, and that was in my favor, and I forgot about it because I disassociated, which was good because I probably couldn't have made it through life because I wasn't able to deal with it yet,
That's right.
So.
And you were doing the best you could at the time, and you're doing the best you can, excuse me, in each meditation. It keeps coming back until it's totally uprooted. And it for all of these very deep and difficult things, there are layers and layers and layers. And there will come a time when there's full resolution and it doesn't come back. But thank you for persevering. And thank you for being that, for voicing that, because that is the expression of many people's experience. And probably each time you go into it, there's another level of understanding that is open to you, another level of wisdom that's accrued from looking at it. So eventually it will be the ultimate wisdom and the ultimate bodhicitta. As we, and again, this is why I like that metaphor of dancing with anger, because when it's something we're working with for a long, long time, like a lifelong wound that takes quite many, many levels of investigation, as we near the end, it's, oh, there you are again. All right, let's meet again, let's look again. It's not so charged. So it may be surprisingly triggering still, but soon it will be your familiar dance partner as it gets towards the end of the investigation. So nothing to fear. The realization at the end of the path is our Buddha nature as we keep looking. And one of the wonderful things that you've just expressed is that you love yourself enough to keep looking when it comes up, that you love yourself enough to want to be free of that pain. And so developing that level of compassion is expansive. That level of a compassion then also transfers to seeing the woundedness and the brokenheartedness of all the beings that you encounter, the fellow humanness. So it's not in any way indulgent. It's a way to learn how to access your Buddha nature and your freedom from suffering. Instead of, why is it over now? I want it to be done. The frustration that we can feel. It's shocking to me how long some of these things last and how patient we have to become. Because we're such good meditators. Should be done. But we're human beings. Okay, let's keep going. Before we go on, is there anything else? Yeah, John?
Thanks, Khenmo. For me, I'm not conscious of holding a lot of grudges or getting really angry, but what really triggers me horribly is witnessing hostility, or as a third party, or bullying, or nastiness, or violence. And it's not just, I don't get just triggered into lovely compassion. I make a judgment as to who's right and who's wrong. Even not just humans. I remember watching a couple months ago a lovely documentary about the scientists working with this absolutely lovely octopus. And there's a scene there where the octopus gets taken by a shark, and I was not feeling equal love to both those creatures. That's a sweet or cute example, but it's real for me. But I have a real hard time if I witness abuse, hostility, and I have a tendency to be very, very judgmental and boiling about it. So it's not to myself, but it's still the same thing, right?
Eventually it is the same thing, because you're giving rise to anger for one thing, and you have, not you, but I think any of us, having lived through the election, can say we have a habit of anger in certain situations, and so we need to resolve that anger. And going back to the prayer we say at the beginning, may all sentient beings, including the people who are bullies, including the people who are the warlords, including the people who are the politicians who are making destructive decisions. So all of those people have a Buddha nature that is the same as our own Buddha nature. So the same analysis of seeing them as overtaken by ignorance, overtaken by anger, that's not different from when I, observing them, get overtaken by anger. So you are in a dance with those beings when you get angry. Yeah, Paul.
I would just like to read back to you something you said yesterday, if I may, Khenmo. Accept everything in the world as a dance of wisdom and ignorance. Look through a clear glass pane instead of through boiling water. See the world with tenderness and apply skillful means. I mean, it's just beautiful. It meant so much to me.
Oh, thank you for reading that back. How nice. Aren't we all gifted with wonderful teachers that understanding arises? Yes. Yes, may we get to that point, each and every one of us. Any other thoughts, insights? Okay. So the culmination of the beauty of this chapter is, once we're not creating an enemy, then can we start to see how we are valuing that being that we're in the dance with? And I think because I'm thinking of Pema Chodron and my time at Gampo Abbey a lot today, I had a friend who was the retreat master. She was the 3-year retreat master. And Pema really has incredible wisdom. And this woman, although she had completed many 3-year retreats and was teaching the 3-year retreat, she was in her 80s and she said, you know, my health is failing. I'm not enlightened. How can I get through this last barrier? How can I really make progress? And Pema said to her the most beautiful advice: when someone or something makes you angry, bow to that person as your teacher. Think, and their teacher was Trungpa Rinpoche, prostrate saying, Trungpa Rinpoche, thank you for appearing in the form of this being coming to teach me in this moment so I can immediately let go of this anger or transmute this anger. And the thing that gave her, Annie Palmo, the most joy and pleasure was putting out birdseed. And she would become enraged every time the squirrels ate the birdseed. And she started practicing that every day. She'd see the squirrel and she would say, thank you, Trungpa Rinpoche, coming in the form of this squirrel. And immediately that transmuted the anger. So as the chapter develops, Shantideva says, let's look at what's happening in this situation. All right, so even in the mild situation that John was talking about, when we get angry at someone who's clearly doing something destructive, and we think we're so righteous, and we all share this, John, I'm not putting this on you. We think we're so righteous when we call out the destructive behavior. Those who harm me come against me summoned by my own karma, so they will be the ones who go to hell, and it is myself who brings their ruin. And I'm going to read another translation of that verse. Those who hurt me are impelled by my actions, a result of which they will go to the infernal realms. Surely it is I alone who have ruined them. Surely it is they who are harmed by me. They who are harmed by me. So he's immediately reversing our expected process. You did something to me, you were wrong, I am the one who's harmed. And said, okay, it was our mutual karma that put us in the same moment of time. I held out my body, they held out the weapon, but I'm responding with patience and dissolving my anger. I am benefiting in this situation, and they who have created such evil karma are deeply harmed by the karma they've created. So surely it is I alone who have ruined them. So this is quite a reversal, a shocking reversal, but really a help to just change the dynamics of victimhood. We are benefiting by everything we learn, even though it may take a long time to learn. We are growing in our prajna, in our wisdom. It's painful, it's difficult, but we're growing. And such an evil deed is surely causing them irreparable harm that they will carry forever. Because of them and through the exercise of patience, my many sins are cleansed and purified, but they will be the one, thanks to me, who will have the long drawn out agonies of hell. So we don't have to get into like the language of hell and sins and things like that, but they have created such a harmful pattern in their mind and strengthened whatever harmful patterns were there already. And we are being purified by investigating and in examining and growing. And now we get into the high drama of Shantideva, sort of, this is his, essentially we're reading his journal on his path to enlightenment. So it is how he is working with directly his own experience. Therefore, I am their tormentor. Therefore, it is they who bring me benefit. Thus, with what perversity, pernicious mind, will you be angry with your enemies? Really, isn't that Shakespearean? Thus, with what perversity, pernicious mind, will you be angry with your enemies? So since I am causing harm to them, and they are benefiting me, why, unruly mind, do you become angry in such a mistaken manner? If I repay them harm for harm, indeed they'll not be saved by thereby, and all my noble actions will be spoiled, austerity of patience brought to nothing. So here we are, wonderful practitioners. We see the news. If we respond with anger instead of patience, then our practice is brought to nothing. The politicians are not harmed by us shouting at the TV, and we are harming our own patience, our own good work that we've been doing on the cushion. He's quite lovely. He goes through what is it like to be insulted? What is it like to go through all of the worldly concerns when someone destroys your reputation, when someone steals from you, when your fame is spoiled. I mean, if we look at today with, you know, just like this, someone who's very prominent is accused of some terrible deed and then they're canceled, you know, so all of these things are worldly concerns that we have a comfortable life. And we go back to really understanding karma. And so when we think of Gurchen Rinpoche, if you haven't read his second biography, it is the most profound teaching. And it is really, Susu presented it so beautifully. When he was imprisoned, he said he understood that being in prison was the karmic result of his angry mind. He really understood deeply in prison the anger. And he really practiced with these teachings, not responding in anger, and eventually befriending the guard. But you can see, because it goes, you know, for the first 10 years, I worked with this one verse that the Lama gave me. For the next 10 years, I worked with this one verse. So he took one teaching on karma and anger and held it in his mind like a piece of gold. And with every situation that arose on his path, he recalled that verse and said, this is happening now because of my karmic deeds in the past. If I respond in anger, then I am causing more karma in the future. If I don't respond in anger, then I am increasing my wisdom. And what struck me the most in reading the biography, there were so many things that struck me, but when it got to the point where he was given a pass to go visit his relatives, and this was something like the 19th year, he got a pass to visit his relatives, and you know, he has long lost loved ones he hadn't seen in all of these years, and they're having tea and they're feeding him candy and delicious food, everything that they could give to him. And they said, Rinpoche, don't go back, please stay, please don't go back. You know, his pass was only for a certain number of days. And he said, don't worry. It doesn't matter whether I'm here or there, because my mind doesn't change whether I'm here or there. So through working moment by moment with everything that arose, he achieved a Vajra wisdom and bodhicitta that was independent of whatever circumstances in the physical world. And so that line from Pema Chodron that we started, when we see the inherent goodness in the mud and the lotus, then the outer circumstances have no effect on our wisdom mind. So we're working through this chapter very, very quickly. Now we're about midway. And he makes another even more firm resolve. This I see, and therefore come what may, I'll hold fast to the virtuous path and foster in the hearts of all an attitude of mutual love. If pains of even this my present life are now beyond my strength to bear, why do I not overthrow my anger, cause of future sorrows in infernal torment? So he's convincing himself over and over again to keep going, as Barbara was sharing, when layer after layer presents itself, when we're triggered again and again as we're working along. And then we get to the culmination. Okay. I'm seeing why all the verses are there, because I have the older document open. I condensed the chapter to just a few verses. All right, so as we're working with this, we have the resolve, we're sitting in meditation, we're looking at layer after layer. Then a way to elicit an even more direct wisdom is to then sit and look directly at the mirage that we were talking about yesterday. Okay, anger is not in the TV set with the politicians. It's not in my eyes and it's not in my ear that's hearing. It's not only where is the anger, but who is angry. So in the final uprooting of anger, it's connected to the uprooting of the I and thou. Enemy, victim. Who is it that's angry? And we do a thorough search. Where is the I that was the victim? Where is the self that is harmed? Who is angry? And these two investigations, where is the anger and who is angry, when we're not triggered into the heat of the emotion, it's Pema Chodron describes it, there's the heat of the emotion and there's the coolness of the emotion. When the heat is cooled, then in the coolness of the emotion, we can begin a Vipassana investigation. Who is angry? Who is it that is hurt? It is summoning our prajna, strengthening our prajna, our innate intelligence, our wisdom to search for this I that is angry, this anger that is a mirage. Finally and eventually seeing the emptiness of the anger, the emptiness of the I and the emptiness of the thou. And as we work with the coolness, when we have the ease and familiarity and all of the wonderful teachings to rely on, Shantideva takes the final step with us. So like a treasure found at home, enriching me without fatigue. All enemies are helpers in my bodhisattva work and therefore should be a joy to me. Imagine in that final uprooting, that glimpse that we have of the nature of our mind. Through this experience, we can sincerely say, like a treasure found at home, enriching me without fatigue. All enemies are helpers in my bodhisattva work, and therefore should be a joy to me. And he doesn't stop there. the exquisite framework that he's built of logic in this chapter, I should make offerings to them, because they've been such a great helper. And then showing his humanness, he goes, but, no, they really wanted to harm me. They shouldn't be honored. I'm not going to honor them. But then he settles down again. And I love this manner he has of teaching, of being so honest and transparent that he doesn't really want to thank his enemies. He doesn't want them to be a joy to him. But then he reviews again another layer, goes in again for one more look. Had he not worked to help me like a doctor, how could I have brought forth this patience, this ultimate bodhicitta, this clarity of looking at my mind and touching into the mixture of bodhicitta and wisdom? Had he not, like the oncologist, given me the chemotherapy, it hurt, it was difficult, but how else could I have fully healed? And the culmination is, then I have to thank him and acknowledge him as no different than His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche or His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche. They gave me the profound Dharma, and this so-called enemy was the teacher that gave me the lived experience to apply that Dharma. The wisdom accrued is dependent on both of them. If I hadn't had the lived experience to apply the Dharma, I wouldn't have the breakthrough. So how can I say that I bow to one teacher and not the other teacher? This is how we finally one day are able to acknowledge the Buddha nature of what seemed to be an enemy is no different from our own and no different from our greatest teachers. And when we can get to that point, there is the freedom. When we can look beyond the victim and perpetrator, leading us into looking at, is there an I? Is there a thou? That is the doorway into fulfilling the fruition of our prajna. That extraordinary, exquisite bodhicitta that is mixed with the wisdom of emptiness, because it has no I or thou to make a boundary that limits the bodhicitta in any kind of way. This is why this chapter is so profound and always a teaching every time I explore it. its meaning and beauty and practicality becomes evident yet again, and more clear in terms of understanding. So I want to go back to the quote from the very beginning that I gave you from Khenpo Sultram Gyatso. Let me see if I can find it. All right. Through the investigation, through the strengthening of our prajna, we can understand that our mind, whether it's still or moving, still in terms of a samadhi, moving in terms of thought, our mind is none other than clear light, clear and aware. And that clear light is pervasive. The Dharmakaya is pervasive through our mind and all of our thoughts. So in the same way that our Buddha nature is the same as the Buddha nature of His Holiness, when we distinguish anger as a bad thought and bodhicitta as a good thought, what we're not seeing is that the Dharmakaya pervades both thoughts, and that the mind moving or still is Dharmakaya ultimately. So even our anger holds the potential like our Buddha nature, but ultimately is none other than Dharmakaya wisdom. I'm going to read this quote again. No matter what thought occurs, if good or bad, no matter what feelings are felt, if pleasant or not, knowing them all to be clear light mine, let them be like an ocean with its waves. The ocean is at once the stillness of the bottom of the ocean and the waves at the top. The nature of the wave isn't different than the nature of the ocean. The nature of our clear light mind is Dharmakaya, no matter what thought is occurring, no matter whether our mind is still or moving. So let's just sit with that for a minute and take that really to heart. Instead of judging and reproving ourselves, really seeing our Buddha nature and really taking in the pervasive Dharmakaya presence. Okay. So I'd like to do the closing prayers. I will share the prayer book. Okay, there it is. By this virtue may I achieve omniscience, and may all who travel on the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion the cause of suffering. See how that's a teaching of this whole chapter. The confusion is the cause of suffering, not the enemy. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise, where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. For this realm encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may you remain steadfast until samsara's end. Embodiment of the three precious jewels, Padmapani, who holds the teachings of the victorious one, seeing the all-goodness meaning with the wisdom eye, may you who are the spontaneously established activities live long for hundreds of kalpas. Noble Manjushri, the Lord of Speech, who manifests to hold the teachings of the Triple Gem, who raises the lamp of the sage's teachings, may you who are the light of the Dharma live long for hundreds of kalpas. The one known in the Holy Land as Aryadeva, emanated into the Gar clan of Eastern Tibet as Chodingpa, the heart son of Jigten Sungun. May the life of glorious Garchen remain steadfast for 100 eons. So all this time in dancing with anger, we are dancing with our Dharmakaya wisdom. Any last thoughts you want to contribute? Well, really, thank you for being here, and thank you again for opening the treasure of our mind that's sometimes filled with hard things that are indefatigably working to benefit us.
Well, and let me say once again, thank you, Khenmo, for offering this program for us and being so generous with your time and your wonderful Dharma knowledge. I can speak from personal experience. This has been very valuable for me, and I really can't thank you enough. So allow me to offer this kata along with anybody else who might have one or others who can just visualize through me. All the offerings we can give, because I just found this to be so wonderful and helpful, and I'm sure many other people did as well. So thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Lama Kelsang, for creating such a wonderful center in Pittsburgh and doing such wonderful Dharma activities and really being so far from home in a really difficult time period and carrying on with strength and courage to benefit beings.
For those who want to give monetarily, I put some information about Donna in the chat, a link to Khenmo's support page and a link to our website where you can figure out how to support the Three Rivers Center. So please give generously, anybody who's able to, so we continue to support Khenmo and the center and all the Dharma activities.
Thank you, Khenmo. Thank you, Toby. Thank you,
My
everyone.
pleasure.
Thank you
so much.
Khenmo. And thank
Beautiful.
you as always.
Beautiful teaching.
And really thank you for your practice.
We're so humbled.
Take care.
Take care,
Take
everybody.
care, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.